Hello everyone, welcome to the video. Please like and subscribe. Also, check out the author down below. And with that, let's begin. Chapter 21, Sports Festival. Third POV. The weeks passed and it was now time for the sports festival. Izuku groaned when he woke up from his nap that morning and started to get dressed. Really, how am I going to do this since the little brat is meant to be within 5 feet from me at all times? I could use the mud clone quirk, but I just have to hope no one attacks it since those are so easily breakable. Izuku thought as Ijiro came into the kitchen and spoke. I notice you never really sleep. Is that due to your immortality? Ijiro asked and Izuku shrugged a bit. Hard to tell for sure, but I think so, or it might be due to living so long that I am used to not running on a lot of sleep. Might also be from the quirk riots when you couldn't sleep long, since someone might kill you in your sleep if they suspected you had a quirk. Multiple reasons on why I might be like this, but it works for me, Izuku said, and Ijiro nodded his head. They both started to eat the breakfast that Izuku had quickly made before heading off towards the school. Remember, I will be dropping out in the first round since I need to go guard the little brat Taki, Izuku said, and Ijiro asked how the prince was a little brat when he is roughly the same age as himself in the class. Izuku turned to Ijiro and said that he and the class were brats in his eyes as well. Remember, you are all but babies in diapers to me and my life experiences. So a brat is a brat. You are just a more adorable brat that I want to raise instead of tolerating all of the other brats, Izuku said with a deadpan experience that made Ijiro unknown if he wanted to laugh or cry. Ijiro just chooses to shake his head and make his way towards the classroom where they were meant to meet. Soon they were told to go get changed into gym uniforms and get on the bus since it would take them to the sports festival stadium. Roughly 30 minutes later, after listening to everyone on the bus, they soon arrived at the stadium. Izuku said he needed to head to the restroom really quickly since they all had to wait in the waiting rooms first. They all nodded their heads and Izuku quickly went into a restroom and made the mud clone, which took a bit longer since there wasn't much mud nearby and he had to pull it through the bathroom window, which took a second to do. However, he soon had a mud clone made and sent it back towards the waiting room while Izuku transformed into his shadow outfit. Izuku used his quirk to hide his presence as he left the bathroom and made his way towards the convey that was delivering the prince to the stadium. They were told to enter via the back entrance where no one was allowed to come in except staff, police, and heroes. As such, Izuku waited at the entrance until he saw the convey. Soon the convey was inside the gates and stopped as they waited for Izuku. The door opened and Izuku entered it as per planned, where he dropped his quirk and showed himself. I see your father sent only a few shadow guards, Izuku said, and Taki nodded his head. Father knows you can handle anything that comes my way, so they are for appearance's sake. Since you will be hiding since you don't want a connection between Shadow and the royal family being made yet, Taki said, and Izuku nodded his head as that was indeed true. It would be troublesome to answer questions or avoiding things if the connection was made. He also didn't need to bring his father's attention to the royal family yet. Soon the car arrived at the stadium itself and came to a stop. Remember, Taki, your father is allowing you to be here as long as you are within 5 feet of me, while listening to any commands I give. Disobey and I will take you home, where I will take you over my leg as I smack your ass like I did when you were younger and decided it was a smart idea to set fire to my room. Do you understand me? Izuku said, and Taki blushed a bit in embarrassment. Come on, uncle, that was an accident, Taki said, which Izuku rolled his eyes at, but no one could tell. Really? Still claiming that defense even though a fire isn't used to help water a plant like you claimed it was, Izuku said with a teasing tone. And Taki pouted and mumbled that he was only 6 at the time, which made Izuku laugh as he rubbed the prince's head. The shadow guards were still getting used to Izuku Aka Shadow since they were told about him being the shadow commander before he left the royal palace on his last visit. To say it was an interesting show would be minimum, as Izuku had been dramatic as hell about it. So uncle, after your life mission is done, are you going to return to the palace full-time as the shadow guards commander, or are you still throwing all your duties onto the vice commander like normal? Taki teased and Izuku shrugged. I don't know. It depends on what your father wants me to do after all of this. I wouldn't mind relaxing with you all in the palace, but you have to remember I did adopt a kid now, so maybe after he goes out on his own, Izuku said, and Taki nodded his head. They had stepped out of the car since they had finished their main conversations and would talk more in the booth since they had been at the stadium for a few minutes already. Izuku hides once again so others wouldn't see him as the door was opened by a shadow guard that had gotten out already. Let's go. The festival is about to start and we need you in the booth before it starts, Izuku said, and Taki nodded his head as he stepped out of the car and Izuku followed after him. The other shadow guards also came out after a few seconds to ensure Izuku had already gotten out since he was hidden. After a few seconds, they started to move towards the stadium and entered the building. They did receive some looks from other people, but Taki's face was hidden and not many knew of the shadow guards, so they got looks as well, but people just thought they were heroes. As they were walking, the shadow guards were looking for any threats on the path, which was a back route to get to the booth that Nezu had made sure to block off to the public. As such, they didn't encounter anyone on their route. They made their way towards the booth that the prince was going to be seated in, and overall, it had everything the prince could need for the entire day, from food, drinks, bathrooms, entertainment during breaks, and many other things. As they arrived and the prince sat down, they noticed all of the students were in the process of being called to the stage. "So, uncle, who do you think will win?" Taki asked, even though Izuku was still hidden, but it appeared as he was talking to one of the shadow guards. Izuku thought it over. Possible winners are Bakugo, Todoroki, and Ijiro. Todoroki has a smaller chance since he denies half of his power due to what I think is tied to Endeavor in some form, which I've started looking into on the side, but regardless, it's still idiotic. I am debating on having him kicked out of the hero course if he keeps this up, since I have no need for someone who holds back when the life of innocence is on the line. Bakugo's ego and anger issues might screw him up, and Ijiro had the best overall chance if he doesn't get cocky, Izuku said as they listened to the announcers. But before midnight could call the first place winner to the stand, Principal Nezu cut over the microphone and televisions in the stadium, which confused the staff. "Greetings everyone, and welcome to the first-year sports festival. This year is a little special, as in attendance we have His Royal Highness Prince Taki," Nezu said as the camera pointed at the booth where the prince was. But Izuku wasn't shown since he was hidden. Everyone in the stadium stood up and bowed towards the prince as customs dictated, and the prince waved his hand. Soon the camera went back onto Nezu as he spoke a bit more before handing it back to Midnight. Izuku came out of hiding since he didn't want the others to know that he was a part of the Shadow Guards. Soon the first-year representative, which was Ijiro, came to the stand and gave his speech. Once he was done, it was now time for the sports festival to kick off. While the real Izuku was up in the booth, the mud clone of Izuku was down on the stadium listening to Midnight and getting ready as the sports festival was starting. Izuku reviewed the information he received from the mud clone and wanted to roll his eyes when he saw that Todoroki had challenged Ijiro to a fight, since he believed All Might had an eye on Izuku's adopted son. Izuku really wondered what the hell was wrong with Todoroki, but couldn't think of anything at the moment since he's never paid attention to the heroes that much due to always hunting down his father or doing other matters for the royal family. As the sports festival started, it turned out the first match would be an obstacle course, which was a perfect way for Izuku to knock himself out of the competition. Taki rolled his eyes at his uncle, chuckling, and watched the festival go on. Though Taki did remove his head cover, as well as the windows had a feature on them that allowed them to be turned into a one-way window. This also allowed Izuku to show himself and stop using his quirk. Got to thank Nezu for texting me about that feature, since I don't have to hide myself the entire time and can relax a bit, Izuku thought as he had sat down near the prince. "There goes my mud clone," Izuku said as they watched the mud clone fall off the rope sections where you had to cross a huge opening to get to the next stage. "At least it looked real," Taki said with a shrug of his shoulders. They watched as Ijiro and the others made their way through the stages. Todoroki froze the bombs on the ground as he slides across it, while Bakugo flew across with explosion. But Ijiro was different as he gathered up some bombs and then jumped on them with his hardening on as he blasted himself across the minefield and into the first place spot of the race as he landed hard, but One for All kept him going as he dashed forward. Izuku wondered if Ijiro was just going to keep float hidden for now, since no one has seen him use it. His classmates knew about it and so did Eraserhead, but Izuku didn't know if All Might knew about it yet, which would be funny to watch the man's face when he sees the quirk. Though, it turns out Ijiro did indeed come in the first place position for the first portion of the sports festival. Next, it was time for the next round to start, though Izuku did receive a text message from Nezu. The message was an anticipated one, as the staff was concerned about the fact that Izuku Midoriya had gotten taken out in the first portion of the event, but they couldn't do anything about it since the mud clone was currently sitting in the seating area for one, of which showed as physical evidence that he wasn't running around doing anything evil. As such, All Might still have no reason to get Izuku questioned legally, which made Izuku smirk as he was enjoying tormenting All Might slightly. As they watched the cavalry battle portion start, Taki spoke up to his uncle Izuku. "Uncle, Dad wanted me to give you a mission while I was here during the internship week, since you will be able to move around unnoticed. The hero killer stain needs to be dealt with as they are causing too many issues publicly, so we would like you to go out and deal with him," Taki said without turning away from the cavalry battle, as Todoroki was in the midst of trying to steal the 1 million headbands from Ijiro's team but was having some trouble in doing it. "Oh, does he want me to go as my student self or as Shadow?" Izuku asked, and Taki said as Shadow, but to have his internship done in Hasu, where Stain was currently. "I believe you have a hero license name that is registered to Hasu, so you could use that to get yourself in the city without raising suspicious. Then you can go out as Shadow without anyone knowing, since if someone did check in on you, then you could easily get to wherever you need to be," Taki said, and Izuku nodded his head as he was impressed with the little tiger's analysis of the situation. "It seems those analysis lessons I've been ensuring get passed down have really shown fruit, since you analyzed the entire situation quite well. Good job, little tiger," Izuku said as he ate a grape. Taki just huffed a bit as he rolled his eyes, and they continued to watch the fight as the second round was called. Izuku did notice that Todoroki almost started to use the fire side of his quirk for a few moments near the end, which was interesting. Izuku decided to have his mud clone go spy on Todoroki for a while since he felt something was up, and what he ended up hearing was quite interesting, but also it made Izuku start to get enraged. As we switch to the mud clone's POV, we can hear Todoroki ask Ijiro if he was the secret love child of All Might due to the feeling they give off. Ijiro started to laugh and told Todoroki that he wasn't the love child of All Might. No, my birth parents died when I was young. I was in foster care for a while until recently, where I got adopted, so I have an amazing father now who actually cares for me and my needs, Ijiro said, and Todoroki nodded his head and apologized for taking his time up then, but as he was leaving, Ijiro decided to push the issue and ask why he wondered if he was the love child of All Might. It was then that Todoroki explained what his father Endeavor had done to him and the family. Izuku's mud clone was downright pissed on the other side of the wall, and even the real Izuku was furious as he was fed the information. Taki asked what was wrong since he has hardly ever seen his uncle that upset. Taki, remind me I come to visit this weekend since there will be some time to talk to your father about the removal of a high-ranking hero. Endeavor has been abusing his family, and my mud clone just overheard his son tell a good chunk of what Endeavor has done to my adoptive son, Izuku said as he was seething right now and controlling his anger. Not even All For One, the number one evil, was that pathetic in using or abusing his own child. Izuku had seen many things in his years, and Endeavor was high up on the shit list with Izuku now. Taki nodded his head and was disturbed by the little information he heard from his uncle. It was a really bad issue if the number 2 pro hero was abusing his family, and Taki wondered how long has it been going on and if anyone in the Hero Commission knew about it. Taki just sighed and knew there would be a large discussion about what his uncle had learned in the next few days, so he shouldn't worry about it for now. Instead, he turned his attention back to the sports festival like the 1v1 tournament portion was starting. Overall, it went smoothly. Expect a few portions where Todoroki almost iced the audience with a large ice attack. Izuku didn't like what it represented as he knew he would be looking over all the video footage of the day to see where Endeavor was at during the entire event, and to see if he could get some evidence against the man. The next most interesting match was Todoroki against Ijiro, who ended up breaking his fingers a few times as he forced Todoroki to use his fireside in the matches. Ijiro did use float to keep himself in the ring from what Izuku could see, but he doubted anyone else noticed it since it was so little on usage near the end as both individuals were still in the ring. But Ijiro was still able to endurance as he charged across the ring and knocked Todoroki out of the ring since the boy was exhausted due to never using his fireside. The last match was Bakugo against Ijiro, and it was honestly a lackluster battle since Ijiro's quirk was a good counter against explosion. Ijiro just used his hardening and OFA and powered through as he grabbed Bakugo and walked him to the edge of the ring where he dropped him out of it, which made Izuku laugh at Bakugo's facial expression. Bakugo looked like he wanted to rage, but a staff person quickly escorted him out of the arena so he wouldn't cause any issues. As such, it was determined that Ijiro was first, Bakugo was second, and Todoroki was third. This brought the sports festival to an end, and it was time for Taki to leave as the shadow guards escorted Taki to the car while the awards were being given out since people wouldn't have left yet. Once Taki was leaving, Izuku headed back inside and switched positions with his mud clone and returned to the one of seats with no one except Nezu and his son being wiser of Izuku Midoriya never really being around the entire time. After a while, they did get sent back to the classroom where Eraserhead was going to be talking to all of them about the sports festival and internship offers that they would be receiving. Though, Izuku could tell Eraserhead was sending a few looks in Izuku's direction every once in a while, which Izuku wanted to laugh at. Eraserhead then started to speak about how they all did, and if they didn't do well then there was always next year. Though, if you don't get offers there is still the general list of some hero agencies that we offer for you all to go through, Eraserhead said and then dismissed them. Izuku got up like nothing was wrong and left with Ijiro. Though, Izuku didn't know was that there was going to be many things going on in the upcoming internship week. Real name, Izuku Midoriya. Ollie's, Shadow, Mr. Tanato. Occupations, Underground Hero and Leader of Shadow Guard. Former Principal of UA, Owner of UA. Known quirks, Enhanced All For One, an enhanced copy of All For One. This quirk allows Izuku to copy, take, give, and combine quirks as he wishes. Izuku can also copy from a distance, which causes light tingling sensations that feel as if you are being pricked with a needle. He can also directly touch and use his quirk, but it causes people pain to have their quirks copied or taken. Putting a quirk in a quirkless person is far less painful. Rebirth. This is the immorality quirk that Izuku gained. It merged with his enhanced AFO quirk, which made it even stronger. If the user dies, then the quirk will rebirth them within a minute. Even if the entire body is gone, the user will come back from even a tiny piece of ash. As such, Izuku will never die since as long as a single atom remains, he will always be around. Color change allows the user to change their eye and hair color at their will. This quirk was combined from two individual quirks that Izuku had found that was called Eye Changer and Hair Changer. Hair growth. This allows the user to grow their individual hair across their body. It does not allow him to change the hairstyle, but that can be done via other products. It doesn't allow them to shorten either and only grow it. Anamorphs. This provides the user the ability to change their appearance into anyone they have seen before. As such, Izuku uses this to change his overall appearance and then use the other appearance-changing quirks to make changes in eye or hair color so that he isn't mistaken for that said individual. He uses this to hide over the centuries since his main body is stuck at the age of 28 of when he died. Presence concealment. The user must hold their breath to conceal their presence. Breathing undoes the quirk. As such, training and holding the breath allows the quirk to last longer. Natural enchantment. This quirk provides the user a doubling effect of their natural abilities. As such, the faster they can move without the quirk, they will gain double that while the quirk is activated, double their natural strength, speed, agility, and so on. Enhanced vision. This quirk allows the user to have perfect eyesight and can pick up smaller details when they are actively looking for something. Recall. This allows someone to recall any memory that they have ever had. Advanced telekinesis allows the user to control any objects up to a limit. Currently, Izuku had no problem lifting weights that equal that of a tank, which is roughly 60 tons. Izuku can also use this to control his own body and have a form of flight. Expanded lungs allows the user to have an expanded lung capacity. Normally this is used for breathing underwater and swimming, but Izuku uses it in sync with his stealth quirk. Presence concealment. Advanced regeneration allows the user to regenerate from wounds using stamina. This quirk can be turned on and off. Izuku usually keeps it off to conserve energy, since if he receives a fatal one and he has time, he will just let himself be reborn. Caffeine. The user can consume any drink with caffeine and store the energy in his body for later use. As such, the user can have a large supply of energy to replenish their stamina whenever they wish. Eagle's Eye. This quirk allows the user to create fake eagles made of energy and send them into the air to scout. The information is fed into Izuku's mind. If too many eagles can cause mental strain and issues, but this drawback is countered by another quirk of Izuku's called Hypermind. Hypermind allows the user to process information in a fast pace and make decisions quickly with all viable information. Izuku acquired this off a chess player at a chess tournament several decades ago and is more or less an inferior version of Nezu's high-spec quirk. MedScan provides detailed knowledge of the wounds, injuries, and any illness inside the human body that the quirk is being used on. It also provides likely outcomes of the person's state and possible solutions for fixing it. Warp Ring. This quirk allowed him to create rings capable of teleporting to one place or another at designated points. They couldn't teleport vast distances, but could easily teleport between two cities, but consumed a lot of energy with greater the distance, which Izuku had plenty of due to his other quirk. Virtual reality allowed the user to project their memories of what they saw into projections that others could interact with on a limited basis. Counter. Redirect energy from attacks back at their opponent. The user could hold onto the energy and release it later after they built it up with more energy, but the user had to be able to withstand the blow and contain it or they would damage themselves. Onslaught. This quirk converted stamina to accelerate the speed of their attacks, causing more power to be behind their attacks. Shock Absorption. Acquired from the Namu at the USJ, this quirk allows the user to absorb shock damage from physical attacks done to them. Hyper Regeneration. This quirk allows the user to regenerate themselves using stamina. This quirk can be turned on and off. Izuku usually keeps it off to conserve energy, since if he receives a fatal one and he has time, he will just let himself be reborn. This quirk is slightly better than Advanced Regeneration. Mud Clone. This quirk allows the user to create a clone of themselves that can move around as they control it via their mind. This clone has 0 fighting abilities and easily destroyable. The Mud Clone is mainly used for scouting and information gathering without risking the main user. Chapter 22. Royal Family and Endeavor. Third POV. After a few days during the break before they returned to UA, Izuku decided it was time to go stop by the royal palace to talk about the issue of Endeavor, as it was going to be an annoying problem that they would need to deal with. Izuku had asked his adoptive son Ijiro if he wanted to go to the palace with Izuku and meet what was more or less his extended family. And Ijiro agreed to do so, but didn't want to be seen by others as it would cause him to be put in the spotlight on why he was inside the royal palace. Izuku waved his hand and said it would be fine, as there are tours through the royal palace all of the time. We can use a fake tour to get to a gate where shadow guards would let us in. Then once we are on the personal side for the royal family, there will only be shadow guards who tend to the royal family and some other government officials. Ijiro nodded his head, and that was how they found themselves on a fake tour walking through the public area where there were always guards with tour groups. But the tour guides for Izuku and Ijiro were in fact a few shadow guards who lead them through a guarded gate. Once they entered that side, Izuku changed his appearance as he stepped behind a tree and out he came as Shadow. Izuku did not go as Izuku Midoriya on the tour since only Ijiro, Nezu, and the royal family knows Izuku Midoriya as Shadow. As such, Izuku used one of his older faces to go on the tour, which shocked the Shadow Guards, who saluted to Izuku since they had learned that he was the commander before the sports festival. "You two may return to your other duties," Izuku said, and they nodded their heads as they disappeared. "Follow me, Ijiro," Izuku said, and Ijiro nodded his head as he followed Izuku deep into the royal palace. And after a handful of minutes walking, they came upon the main throne room where Izuku entered without knocking, which made Ijiro freak out a bit. The emperor looked at who dared to enter without knocking but calmed down when he saw it was only Izuku, but was confused about who was behind him. "Ijiro, meet your extended family. Brats, meet my adopted son," Izuku said with a smile that couldn't be seen due to his mask. Takato just rolled his eyes at being called a brat when he was older than Izuku's adopted son. "Guards, leave us for a while," Takato said as the shadow guards left, and Izuku removed his mask once they were gone as he transformed in his original body. Taki came over and hugged Izuku, who hugged him back before Taki moved on to Ijiro. Ijiro was about to bow when Taki stopped him. "You are Uncle's child, so don't bow to us. Now, if we are out in a huge public area, then yes, but if we are behind closed doors with limited people, then take cues off of Izuku on if to bow or not," Taki said as Ijiro nodded his head. Taki asked if he could take Ijiro around the palace, which Takato said it was fine, which left Izuku and the emperor alone, as Takato's aunt had already left to go do other things after she greeted Izuku and Ijiro. Taki said, "You had some news about Endeavor that you wanted to talk about. It must be important to catch your attention, and to bring it up with me," Takato said, and Izuku nodded his head as he informed the emperor about what he discovered, and showed the recording from the hallway at the sports festival. The fact that people don't think Nezu wouldn't put a lot of cameras in the place after the UA. It's foolish to assume, as he had every inch of the place covered except restrooms due to legal reason. "Nezu and I have also looked into the family a bit more. The mother was placed into a mental ward due to her attack on her youngest son, but I am thinking it's due to her breaking due to abuse from Endeavor. Shouto Todoroki was just unlucky that he was next to her when she broke. Then there are also the issues that surround the oldest son that was reported dead. With everything else, it seems fishy, but I will need to dig into it," Izuku said, and Takedo nodded his head as he listened to Izuku explain everything that was found so far. Takedo was pissed that someone like Endeavor was the number 2 hero. He was also wondering how the commission never found anything out about this. Has the commission gone off the deep end due to our lack of interference? Takedo was concerned about how far things have gone, but decided on a solution in mere seconds as he looked at Izuku, who was waiting for his decision. Takedo stood up from his throne and looked at Izuku in the eyes. Though they both noticed Taki and Ijiro had returned and were silent as they were looking. Neither knew what had happened since they only just arrived, but they could sense the tension in the room. Ijiro was concerned while Taki knew it was something important to trigger this type of response between his uncle and father, though they were both shocked at what they heard. "Shadow, as of right now I hereby order you to include in your lifetime mission the following directives: the removal of any criminal aspects of the hero world, the removal of any criminal or corrupt elements in the hero commission. The first individual in investigation is the number 2 pro-hero Endeavor for his crimes of child abuse, spousal abuse, illegal quirk marriage, and any other crimes you disclose. He is to be removed once you find an ideal situation to remove him by any means needed. Do you understand, Shadow?" Takedo shouted out as he was truly pissed off with the situation, since based on how long Endeavor has been doing his actions, the commission should have found some clues of it, which means the commission was covering it up. Then the tension got broken when they heard someone whisper out the word manly, which made them turn to the side to see the children in the room. Izuku just broke out into laughter. "Leave it to my son to break the tension in the room," Izuku said as he chuckled as he slowed down his laughter. Takedo rolled his eyes as the 2 children got closer. Izuku asked if Ijiro enjoyed the sights of the palace, and he said he did. It was decided that the both of them would spend the rest of the day in the palace before returning the next morning, since Izuku would need to use the remaining days away from UA to dig more into Endeavor and gather more evidence. As the entire family sat down to eat, Izuku sighed as he knew the royal family would be getting more involved in the heroics from now on. Izuku knew things would be getting chaotic in the near future and wondered how much entertainment he would be getting from all of this. Takedo ended up sitting down next to Izuku, who had moved away and was looking out of the window. "Things are going to get hectic, aren't they, Uncle?" Takedo asked, and Izuku nodded his head. "Indeed, the royal family hasn't been this involved since close to the dawn of quirks, but it seems we need to be more forceful as people have gotten too power hungry. The situation with All Might, my father, Endeavor, the commission, and anything else will be a large mess. We will need to remove Endeavor before All Might retires, because if it comes after the fact it will be a far larger mess," Izuku said, and the emperor nodded his head to that statement as he looked outside to see the setting sun. "Remember, Uncle, you are free to act as you wish with any crimes you find that heroes are doing. And if you find anything about anyone in the commission, you are free to act as you wish as well. It's time we tighten the strings on the commission since they have forgotten who are the real masters in this country are. No mercy is to be given if the crimes are large enough, Takedo said as he stood up and joined his son and Ijiro, who were playing a game of chess. Ijiro was still a bit nervous around the royal family, but he was getting better at not being formal with them since they were more or less his family as well. Izuku smiled at seeing them all together and was glad he became a part of this family that was in front of him. He just hopes he can protect them against any threats in the future, as he knew the times were going to get chaotic. The night came and went as it was now the next morning, which meant it was time for Izuku and Ijiro to return to their home since Izuku needed to get to work on looking into his new mission that has been added into his lifelong mission. To think I am now going to play babysitter for all of the heroes and the commission itself. It was such a good idea of the old emperor from the dawn of quirks was smart in making the shadow guards so we can counter the commission's stupidity. Izuku thought as he sat in his office doing research on Endeavor. The information that Izuku was getting wasn't pretty in his views, and he was getting more and more annoyed. The amount of damage and deaths that have been caused by Endeavor makes him worse than most villains. Though, Izuku knew the most important issue was Rei Todoroki, who Izuku decided to go visit. Izuku asked Ijiro if he needed anything since he would be gone most of the day since he needed to work on a case for the family. Ijiro was confused for a second about what case until he realized family meant the royal family and realized it was most likely about Endeavor. Ijiro said he didn't need anything and told Izuku to nail Endeavor to the wall for what he had done to Ijiro's classmate, which Izuku said he would as soon as possible. This was how Izuku found himself standing outside of Rei Todoroki's mental hospital, where he could see one Shadow Todoroki sitting in the room talking to his mother. Seems the conversation that Ijiro had with Todoroki during the festival that got him to use his fireside made him come to see his mother. Izuku thought as he changed into a completely different hero outfit via his quirk. It was a hero outfit he used about 30 years ago, and the hero name he went by was called Mundane. The reason he went with that name was the fact that he used his mud clones during this time a lot to find information out if he needed it. People would call the mud clones mundane since they had zero combat ability, which leads to him taking it as his hero name for the time period. As Izuku sat there on the roof, he was debating the risks of Shadow Todoroki finding out about the investigation into his father. Soon he came to the decision of allowing the child to know, since it would allow him to gain more evidence with him helping, since Izuku doubted Shadow Todoroki would ever want to help Endeavor avoid paying for his crimes. Izuku quickly moved into the building while hiding his presence until he was outside the room, where he knocked on it and waited to be called in. "Come in," came the voice of Rei Todoroki. Izuku entered and both went on guard at seeing an unknown person in an outfit. "Hello, Rei Todoroki and Shadow Todoroki. I am here due to a case that I have been ordered to deal with," Izuku said with a different voice, since he has gotten so good at using different voices even without a voice modulator to do it. Rei and Shadow both looked confused until Rei asked what case it was. Izuku had sat down near the end of her bed and looked at her. The case is regarding the illegal quirk marriage, the child abuse, and the spousal abuse that Endeavor has conducted. We've started gathering evidence and are looking into if the Commission knew as well, since the Commission has no ability to stop us, as Endeavor is done regardless by the time I end my investigation into him," Izuku said, and both of the Todorokis were shocked and confused, but they were also on guard. Rei though snapped out of it and looked at the person in front of her and asked how he knew about all of this. Izuku turned his eyes to Shadow Todoroki, who looked confused. "Please be careful in the future where you talk about sensitive topics, as you were foolish to not think there wouldn't be cameras at the sports festival. Principal Nezufo Yue is helping me with the case as well, since I acquired the video from him, which I showed my bosses, who authorized the removal of Endeavor from the hero ranks," Izuku said, and that last statement caught both of their attentions at how Endeavor was going to be removed from the hero ranks, since the Commission wouldn't allow it. Rei looked confused and asked how he was going to remove Endeavor when the Commission would never allow it, even though he said they don't have the ability to stop it. I didn't introduce myself. My hero's name is Mundane. I know, horrible name, but it is what it is. Anyway, do you know who has the authority to govern heroics and has the final say?" Izuku asked, and they said the Commission and government. Izuku shook his head, which confused them, which he chuckled at. "The Commission only manages it. Indeed, the government the Diet has power over them if they could reach decisions, but the people who have the real power and final say over heroics is none other than the royal family themselves," Izuku said with a hint of amusement in his voice, as he watched them go wide-eyed when he said it. Now, the royal family hasn't really gotten involved since the dawn of quirks, but due to the recent issues in the video, I showed off what Shadow Todoroki said. Well, the Emperor was not pleased with how Endeavor has managed to stay at the number 2 rank. As such, I've been ordered to remove Endeavor by any means the moment I find a fitting chance to do so. I can do this via different methods, from having him arrested or having him, well, you know, Izuku said, leaving it as an open statement at the end to not actually say that Endeavor could be killed, since he was still their family even if the man was a bastard. Ray asked why he was here then, since he was already authorized to take care of Endeavor. Many reasons, such as gathering more evidence against him so no one can debate us on it. Also, to see how you want me to deal with him, as you are the man's wife and had to suffer under him, so what I do can be influenced by you to a degree. As such, what would you like done to him, Ray? Izuku asked, as he didn't address her as Todoroki, which made her a bit happy. From what he could see, she sat in silence for a while before she looked at her son and sighed. I don't want him dead. I want to have him live and watch as Shadow becomes far better than he could ever be. As a better human being, as a better hero, as a better at everything. I want him to watch as everything he worked for crumbles, but I still can't wish him dead since he wasn't always like this. There was a time we were relatively happy as well, Ray said, and Shadow had held her hand as a few tears slipped from his face and hers. Izuku nodded his head and started to explain that he would be looking for a chance to arrest him and that he would try to do it quietly so that the family wasn't bugged greatly about it. Ideally, I will do it as soon as possible, but it may be a bit of time before I find a good way to remove him from the public eye as quietly as I can. I believe I will try to aim for it, as he suffered a major wound that forced him to retire, and he decided to retire from the public eye, when in fact he will be arrested and placed in prison since he won't get a trial due to his arrest being ordered by the royal family. Izuku explained after he finished getting full statements of their lives and how they were treated by Endeavor. Ray thanked him and soon he disappeared, as he knew he needed to plan out how he would do this, but right now Izuku just wanted to sleep for a bit, since it was a bit late in the night by the time he traveled back home, even though he forgot about the ring teleportation spot he had set up in the house, which he realized when he got home and cursed himself. Chapter 23, Ingenium. Third POV. Time passed and they were all back at UA now, as the break after the sports festival had come to an end. Izuku himself, though, was hard at work while spending some time with Ijiro, as they bonded more in father-son, things that Ijiro never really got to do after his birth parents had passed away. Some of the things included visiting their graves, heading to a park to toss a ball back and forth, and then there was also the short period where Izuku was giving Ijiro the birds and the bees talk. That left them both embarrassed, because Izuku never suspected he would have to ever give that talk in the hundreds of years he had been alive. However, enough of that, as both of them were walking in the halls of UA when Ada walked by them, telling them that they were going to be late. Izuku rolled his eyes as Ada seemed a bit off until he remembered what happened to Ada's brother. It was disappointing in Izuku's mind that such a good hero had gotten injured, but if things went as Izuku planned, then the pro hero Ingenium may be back up at it within a few weeks. The problem Izuku was having was figuring out how to heal the man without blowing his cover as Izuku Midoriya or as Shadow, as he couldn't risk the truth of his quirk getting out. As such, Izuku needed to be careful and was just debating on using a different pro hero name of his that did have a self-healing quirk as their listed quirk. If questions were asked, then Izuku could just say he lied on the registration, and at worst that pro hero name couldn't be used anymore if people looked into it. However, ignoring those thoughts, they had arrived at the classroom where they both sat down as they waited for Eraserhead to arrive in the building. Izuku did remember to send himself a request from his hero name that he used when he worked out of Hasu a while ago, which also happened to be the hero that had the self-healing quirk, which would make things a bit easier for Izuku since he would already be in Hasu deal with other things, which would mean he would have some time to drop by Ingenium as well. After waiting a few more moments, Eraserhead finally entered the classroom, which packets that Izuku knew were the requests that each individual received for internship week. As Eraserhead talked about the requests and the internship week, he finished handing them all out. Izuku wanted to laugh to himself since he only, of course, received his own request, but still, it was funny. Izuku just filled the paperwork out and handed it back to Eraserhead, who had already gotten in his sleeping bag. Eraserhead looked at the paper before nodding as he pulled it into the bag itself. Izuku then walked over to Ijiro and asked how his searches were going. It's going. There are so many that I don't know what to do with them, Ijiro said, and Izuku nodded his head. Look at them in regards to if they can provide you something new or an area that you are currently lacking in, that you can't get somewhere else, Izuku said, which made it easier on Ijiro as he started to sort things out into things he thought would be better. After a while, it was time for lunch, but as they were leaving, the door opened and there was All Might. I am here in a bizarre post-ian, All Might said as he stood up and told Kirishimiya that there was another internship offer that came in a bit later for him. He took it as Izuku was standing a bit away waiting for Ijiro, as he knew All Might didn't trust him one bit. But Izuku had a hint on who the internship offer was from, and he could hear the conversation from the distance away due to his natural enchantment quirk, which boosted his natural abilities, which did include hearing as well. After a few more minutes, Ijiro walked over and they moved on out of All Might's hearing range. If you take Gran Torino, then be careful about what you say, because that old man is really good at finding things out. He also knows about the Watcher, unlike All Might. So again, you will need to be careful with what you say, but overall it should be fine since he a very good hero, Izuku said, and Ijiro nodded his head in understanding. As he told Izuku, he was likely going to go with Gran Torino since he had spent time with the actual user of Float, which may give insight on how the 7th user used the quirk, which might give him ideas. Izuku thought it was a good idea but gave Ijiro a warp ring. Ijiro was confused about what the ring was until Izuku explained. This ring will allow me to warp to your location if I am within a distance of you. It consumes energy to use it, so don't use it yourself unless you are desperate, as you can only go to fixed points or another warp ring. I create them via a quirk I got a long time ago. They help me travel if I need to in a hurry, and I have other quirks that help me offset the side effects, so it's really useful for me. Anyway, if you are ever in danger, call or text me and I will come warping as soon as possible. Izuku said, and Ijiro thanked his dad with a hug, which made Izuku smile, but soon they arrived in the lunchroom and started to get their food. Overall, the time between turning in their requests and going on the internship passed quickly, as they were all now standing at the train station ready to head off to their individual internships. Izuku would be taking the same train with Ida since he would be going to Hasu with Ida, but separating once they arrived. The train ride was honestly boring in Izuku's view since he couldn't do anything that would seem off since Ida was with him, even though the boy wasn't paying that much attention to Izuku due to his thoughts. Though they soon arrived as they both got off the train and stretched. Ada would be walking to his internship while Izuku would simply disappear after making some movements to hide since he would be staying in a hotel nearby, but before Ada could leave, Izuku decided to call out to him. Ada, before you go, listen to me now, Izuku said, and Ada turned to Izuku in surprise since Izuku never said anything during the entire trip, even though they have gotten a bit close in class. Whatever you have going through your mind, don't do it. I have a good guess on what you are going through, and trust me, I know the feels since I have experienced it all in my life, but let me leave you with this. If you do what you plan to do, then your brother and parents will blame themselves for your death, since we both know you don't have the power to take on who you came here for. Izuku said, and Ada thanked him for the advice, but denied knowing what he was talking about as he played dumb with Izuku, who just sighed and waved Ada off. Izuku watched Ada walk away into the distance before leaving as well, though he did take many different routes and paths as he was making sure that he wasn't followed by anyone from UA, even though he knew Nezu would warn him if the Chimera found out about it. The habits of his old life don't go away easily. Izuku soon arrived at the hotel, but he didn't arrive as Izuku Midoriya. No, he arrived as the pro hero Max. The reason he chooses Max as a hero name back then was that in games when your health bar is full, it appears sometimes as Max for it being full. It was just a play on the idea since he didn't put much thought into it, since he wasn't really known by anyone during this phase of being a hero. After checking into the hotel and dropping his things off, he placed a warp ring mark in the hotel room, which he would remove later on, but for now, it was a good way to get back to the hotel unseen by others. Once all of that was done, he left the hotel via the front doors and soon got to work as he decided on an order of things since Stain would be roaming around all night and he still had daylight left. Izuku decided to head to the Hasu hospital so he could check on Ingenium first, because Izuku was honestly hoping that if he healed Ingenium, then Ida would not be an idiot and go after Stain once he heard the news. Izuku walked up to the building and made his way into it as he walked up to the check-in desk where he was asked what he could be helped with. I am here to see the Pro Hero Ingenium. Here is my Pro Hero license, Izuku said as he pulled out his Pro Hero license that would fit for the current hero name he was going under as right now. Izuku honestly loved his Animorph's quirk, since if he had the license or something on at the time he dispelled the quirk or changed to someone else, then the stuff sticks with him. Izuku honestly never figured out where the stuff goes but didn't put much thought into it in all honesty. The nurse finished checking his license over and told Izuku which room Ingenium was in, which he set off to it. After arriving, he knocked on the door and was called in. Izuku found Ingenium with his parents and the doctor. They asked who he was and Izuku provided his license again to Ingenium. I've never heard of you before and it lists your quirk as a self-healing. What can I do for you, Max? Ingenium asked and Izuku chuckled. I am actually here to help you. Though my license says self-healing, I am actually able to do far more than that, as I've come to heal you, though it does come with some warnings of what I would need to do being extremely painful, since I have to use my quirk on you, Izuku said, and everyone in the room was silent. The doctor said it was impossible due to the wound he received, as no quirk could heal it due to consuming so much energy. Typically yes, but my quirk consumes my own energy, which due to my quirk provides me a large amount. I will be a bit exhausted, but I will cover within a day or by eating a lot of food to regain what I lost. Again though, my quirk is really meant to be used on myself, which means when I use it on others it causes a lot of pain, but in return, their wounds get healed. The slower I heal, the less pain it causes depending on the wound, but regardless there will be some pain involved, Izuku said. And then Izuku looked at Ingenium and asked him if he was wanting to undergo the quirk even though it would be painful. It took a few moments, but Ingenium nodded his head and said he would like to undergo it. If so, then I need everyone to leave, as I can't have any disturbances while I'm doing this, as healing another person's body does that my concentration. It should hopefully be done in 15 minutes max, so you must bear the pain, as I will try to keep the pain as little as possible, but there may be portions that I have to speed up on depending on the area. Do you understand ingenium? Izuku asked, and he nodded his head as Izuku asked the doctor to help him shift ingenium on his side so Izuku could be closer to the wounded area, since it was his spine that was injured. After the parents and doctor left, Izuku locked the door and then got behind ingenium. Izuku asked him if he was ready, and ingenium nodded his head as the process started. Putting multiple quirks into people was risking if the quirks didn't sync up, so what Izuku was really doing was removing ingenium's quirk, which was painful since it was a mutation, but it wasn't painful for Izuku. No, it was painful for ingenium as it hurt like hell, but ingenium was amazing as he gritted his teeth. Izuku tried to pull the quirk as slowly as he could, but mutations always hurt the user as they got removed. After the quirk was removed, which took about 5 minutes, Izuku pushed the hyper regeneration, in which he normally kept off since he had the rebirth quirk. The regeneration started, and ingenium was shocked as he gasped as he felt weird as the quirk regenerated everything in his body that was injured. This took only a few moments before Izuku pulled the quirk out, which he did a bit faster than the mutation quirk, which did cause some pain, but Izuku then started to push ingenium's birth quirk back into him, which made him scream a bit. "Fuck, this hurts worse than when you first started," ingenium said as some tears went down his face. "Just hold on, we are nearing the end," Izuku said with a stern tone. And ingenium nodded his head as he clenched his teeth and muffled his screams, as it was indeed painful for the mutation to come back into the body when he was fully grown. This was due to the fact that his body grew with the mutation as it got bigger as he aged, but now he was going through a full-grown mutation that was pushing out of his body as it adapted to having the quirk again. Izuku huffed out because, in all honesty, taking a quirk and not causing a large amount of pain was indeed exhausting. If Izuku didn't care about who he was taking a quirk from, then he could easily rip it from them, which risked putting people into comas, but instead, he just copied quirks, which was a slow pinching feeling over the time he had to clone it. Izuku rolled ingenium on his back and walked over to the door and opened it as he told them all to come back in. Izuku sat down back in his seat as he asked ingenium to try and move his legs, which took a second as the nerves were newer as they just regenerated, but he got moving within a few moments, and it was as if he never got injured. To begin with, ingenium stood out of the bed as he was shaking for a few seconds since he hadn't walked for several weeks, but he was able to walk without issue within moments. You just need to get used to walking again, since you have been sitting down for weeks, but overall there shouldn't be anything wrong with you. Well, back to the field, ingenium, Izuku said as he sat there. As ingenium walked around the room until the man moved to Izuku and hugged him. Ingenium and the family were thanking him for what he did, and Izuku waved it off. "Just don't tell anyone, since I don't need the commission hounding me, even though they can't touch me since they don't have enough power," Izuku said as he got up and said he needed to leave since he had taken on an intern for UAS internship week. After a few more words, Izuku left the hospital and headed back to the hotel, where he changed into his shadow appearance and decided to take a short nap before heading out for the night to search for Stain. And with that, I'll see you all in the next part. Take care and bye-bye.